Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Property Podcast today. As you know, I'm your host, Lee Dahill. I've got Bryan with me from Gazeal. We go back a very long time. We're talking about reforms and other stuff that's happening. But before we do anything, as always, I like my guests to do their own introduction because they can do it better than I can. So, Bryan, over to you, buddy, for an introduction as to who you are, what you've been up to, and a little bit about Gazeal.
I didn't realise this was a dating app, Lee, but I'll go through. I'll introduce myself, Bryan Mansell, estate agency dinosaur, probably as to most people, because I started in the industry in 1987, been in it ever since. Co-founded 8 years ago, a business called Gazeal. We, with an ambition back then to change the way that we buy and sell homes in England and Wales, which just so happens is quite relevant right now.
It is indeed, which is actually why you're on the show, Bryan.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a little bit around what are you up to at the moment with that happening?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, I'm an absolute, and I love estate agency, and I have for so many years prior to Gazeal, I was doing industry training, trying to improve the standards. I've managed some large agency groups and some very, very small ones. I've been privileged over my career. But the one thing that I was really hoping for when I started Gazeal was, and the reason I did that and came out of mainline agency, was that I felt that if enough people in the industry got together and kept pushing for change, eventually something might happen, right? We never knew when that would be. And that's what I'm really excited about is happening, is that finally it appears that, the powers that be are listening.
Yes.
That we're yet to see exactly how long it's going to take. I've got a rough idea, and we're in constant communication with government. In fact, we're starting with them tomorrow to start looking at the framework for binding agreements, which I'm really excited about. We've been sort of championing upfront information, sale ready,
Yes.
as I've called it on these podcasts probably before many years, about just simply trying to get a home, a property, ready to be sold the same way you would with a car, right? Or the same way you would with anything. Even these days, right? There's more information on a McDonald's burger, right? In terms of nutrition, calories, ingredients, all that stuff, than there is on a bloody house that's for sale, right? It's quite astonishing, and so I'm really, really pleased and really encouraged about what's coming, because it's basically supporting what we've been doing and what we've been talking about to the industry for so long now. So what we've got in the pipeline, so we obviously are pretty well known now for producing what the government call binding agreements.
Yep.
We call them a reservation agreement. We have a reservation agreement and we have a deposit agreement. So one side of it matches the lettings process. So if you're an estate agent that has lettings and sales, you're now asking either a tenant or a buyer to both put down a holding deposit to secure the property and have it off the market. And if you are successful in your application or your conveyancing, then you get that fully refunded to you on exchange or on move-in with your security deposit. Same principle for Gazeal on residential sales, very, very popular. And then our reservation is a mutual agreement where the seller and buyer both enter into agreement based on all the information they've had and the information they've described about their own position, but they don't pay a deposit in. They sign a bond with each other that says if you pull out, you pay compensation. We guarantee that. So if someone backs out, doesn't pay, to save the problem with the going to courts is that we just make that payment and then we take on board the burden of recovery, not the agent, not the seller, not the buyer. So that's very popular. But the one thing that we are doing, and we've launched this actually prior to the announcement by government in the reform, is that I've long wanted to try to have the Scottish system essentially in England. Very difficult to replicate, but elements of it you can. And so I'm delighted to say almost exclusively to you on this, because it's the first podcast I've done when we've got this live, is that from Monday we are launching, with the help of over 1,000 surveyors through the RPSA, which is the RICS equivalent. You've got the RICS, you've got the RPSA, the Royal Residential Property Surveyors Association. And we're launching a home insights report. So a seller can now, for the very first time, commission a survey on their property that's similar to a level 3 building survey. So it's quite detailed. More importantly, they can make that available for the buyer to look at prior to viewing or prior to making an offer. But the two critical things, which is what we learned from HIPS, which was, first of all, the seller doesn't have to pay for it up front. They pay for it when their sale completes. And secondly, the buyer can use and rely entirely on the information in the survey for the first ever time. So can their conveyancer, which is really important.
Yes.
So a buyer will have access to not only the survey report when they're making an offer, but also the surveyor that did the report. So they can rely on it. So when the buyer then moves into the property, they own that report. So if anything then subsequently turns out not to be right, they've got full recourse with the surveyor as if they'd instructed their own surveyor.
Yes. That's massive.
It is massive. It's transformational, as I call it, because even without one of our agreements, having that survey up front, first of all, every buyer wants to see it.
Yep.
Whether they believe it or rely on it, that's up to them, but it's available, right? So it's better information, a more detailed look at this property that I'm trying to buy or want to buy or think I do. It's also the fact that the seller doesn't have to find £600 to £100 to £1,000 up front in case they don't sell. It removes that barrier, which is a critical one. And just, we are, as a business, we're paying for that survey as a business. And then the seller repays that to us on completion. If they don't sell their house, they can pay it back over 6 months. So there's no credit note, there's no credit file, there's no impact on their personal finances that may affect any future plans. And of course, if you don't sell your house and you've got a survey, you know what you've got to do to improve your house, right? So it's very valuable. So we haven't even launched yet properly, but we've got nearly 250 agencies that are signed up to use it from day one. And it's really, really encouraging that, first of all, the industry is definitely woken up to the fact of having information available up front now is great. Having a survey up front is even better because it completes the picture of information, right? So, and therefore, with or without an agreement, it should have a direct impact in lowering the number of transactions that fail.
Definitely.
So yeah, I'm really excited about Gazeal anyway, but obviously having this additional in, and we've brought this in simply because we know, having pioneered upfront information packs on properties for so long, we know exactly what motivates the buyer to proceed quick. Yes, they can read it. They can read a TA6 and get some critical information. Yeah. Funnily enough, most people want to know on a TA6 which fence is theirs, which is quite interesting. The TA10 is a good one. People like to know what's being left and what's being kept.
Yep.
But the one thing that drives the decision to purchase most of all is the survey.
Yes.
And the benefits, I think, hopefully for most people listening to this will be pretty obvious, right? You either keep your fingers crossed and renegotiate with the buyer down the line 6-8 weeks in, or you do it up front as part of negotiation of the property sale, which is what estate agents are there for. Negotiate.
Yeah, and I think for me the upfront information is so important, because when you make any buying decision of anything you do in the world, pretty much you do it based on all the information you have. Whereas in our property industry, you look around the property, you ask a few questions. How's the windows? How's the door? What fence is ours? If you ask it at that point, most people don't. And then you make the decision not knowing all of the other stuff that's with it. And I feel like having that information would so solve a lot of problems that happen later on, whether it's price renegotiations or whatever it is that you didn't know about when you originally put your price in, and then someone says, no, I want that price for it, and then the whole thing falls apart and you have to go back to square one. And then everybody's dreams of, I liked that house, you like this house, you like that one then resells, now you're not buying that one, you're buying something else, and it's all gone to nothing. With the upfront information could have helped prevent that.
Well, yeah, and what you've also got, and I think, to be honest with you, more importantly, is it's the animosity that these things create during what is a very important part of your life. If you're buying a property or selling one, it is because something's happened in your life. Most of the time positive, but also could be negative. So you imagine on both sides of it, right? You're selling a property, God forbid, because of a death in the family or a divorce in the family or whatever, one of the negative aspects. That's stressful enough, okay? Then to go into a transaction where you've agreed a price with somebody and you still don't know if that's the price you're going to get. A buyer gets a survey done. Buyers do not fully understand, the majority of them, the dynamic of how surveys are written. Surveyors write surveys to protect the surveyor. So they are going in to find things that need to be highlighted, right, as potential problems and issues, not going around saying, this is a great house, you'll be really happy here. They're saying, you need to look at this, you should look at this, maybe right now, or maybe 6 months, but that's going to go, that's going to change. Now, If you then take the average Joe buyer, or Josephine buyer, I should say, who is they're not reading surveys every day of the week,
No.
right? They might have never had one before, or this might be their first one in 20 years, right? They don't understand the dynamic of the surveyor's responsibility. So they're reading this and thinking, oh my God, look at all this stuff we've got to do. And then, of course, the surveyor puts an estimate in there, which freaks most people out and causes them to react emotionally to ask for a very sizable reduction for a repair that may not be required to be done straight away. But what option does the seller have or the agent have other than to say no, which then can lead to either a removal of that buyer and a heavy burden of cost and then starting it all over again. There's just not. This is a win-win-win because agents will win with this, conveyancers win with this, and the buyer and seller does. But here's the thing: controversial or not, you decide. I firmly believe that whilst these reforms are being put together, it's two things. First of all, I think we're going to see a fundamental shift in how properties are marketed and advertised. That the industry can professionalize itself so much more if they're aware of construction types, material types, issues on a property that can be fixed, issues that can improve the value of a property. Marketing that rather than just, it's got a south-facing garden, it's close to the shops, ideal for bar, whatever, right? Which we've always done. This actually encourages people to professionalize the entire delivery of a property, to a market with the buyers than ever before. And I think that's one of the best things because the industry, we all know, has long had a reputation that is unfairly targeted at estate agents from the public because the public don't fully appreciate the role that estate agents do and how difficult that is. But agents don't help themselves either.
No.
So this is a number of steps that can be taken by an agent to begin to really professionalize themselves. And the choice that they have is if they don't, then they'll be forced to by regulation.
Okay.
And if they don't get on board with this now, with these reforms being mapped out and planned out, then they have a choice, which is the second point. Construct it to fit within your business and your principles right now, or be told to do it by somebody else in due course. And if you're told to do it, if you wait that long, then everyone's doing it. So your opportunity for a unique selling point or a unique service level disappears.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it also shows that you're doing it differently before everybody else did it, which is a huge win for you to be able to show what you're doing versus what everybody else is having to do. I like that, Bryan. I like that a lot. I want to ask you, let's pretend we've got our mystic ball right now.
Yeah.
And how long do you think, with the reforms and other stuff that's happening, it will take for this to become where everybody has to do it versus if you choose to do it? Difficult question, Bryan. I'm not going to hold you to it, but what
No. I mean,
what do you think?
my best guess, okay, and this is, I suppose in some ways, party to this because I've been involved in some of the groups that have been discussing this with the consultation, is that it's going to be a staged process. Okay, I think one of the most urgent things to address is the ludicrous requirement for multiple AML checks being done on people.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
I think that is just utterly ridiculous.
One is fine to then be able to share with solicitor, with mortgage broker, with agent, with everybody. Do it once, do it properly, with a legitimate, this is what we use as our trusted source. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it is utterly farcical at the moment that what buyers and sellers have to do with a mortgage broker, an estate agent, a conveyancer, anybody else. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So one point of truth, let's get that done. The second thing is there should be there is standardization for material information, but of course that is quite widespread and not enforced. That's not new. That's been here under the Office of Fair Trading and then the CMA. But that change within government departments has been also ludicrous. Nobody knew that the Office of Fair Trading were no longer the regulatory body for it. And then it went to the CMA, who've been very quiet about the whole process. And we're expecting our own industry to self-police itself, which we know it's not going to happen at scale. So that needs to be, there needs to be a firm set of rules to follow and clear guidance as to what needs to be done. And that needs to be policed properly. Then you've got the conveyancing model, okay? And this personally is where I think the biggest challenge lies. and not at the fault of conveyancers, not at the fault of the industry or anybody else. And I'm not going to say whose fault it could be because I don't want to be that controversial. But there are lots and lots of conveyancing firms that are for this and lots that are against it, almost an equal split. And that worries me a lot about you go to great lengths as a seller, putting this information together. Mm-hmm. Conveyancers, many of the businesses, won't even open a file on that property until a buyer has been found. And I understand that to a certain extent because commercially for them, they're having to do some work. And if that house doesn't sell, they're not going to make any money out of conveyancing. I get that. Margins are tight. I understand that. Whereas some firms will. They take a more pragmatic approach that if we do it on 10, 5 of those will be deals for us. If we do it on none of them, the chance of us getting those 5 are quite low. Freemium, right, is the modern way of doing business for a lot of businesses, especially with apps and so on and so on. So that I see currently as the big issue, that bit on itself. And understandably, what a lot of agents don't understand is that conveyancing businesses are obviously regulated. They obviously have to be, they're regulated by the legal profession, but they also have lots of very high cost, expensive insurances. Professional indemnity insurance is much, much higher on a conveyancer than it is on an estate agent. And they have to work within the parameters of lenders panels, lenders criteria. Mm-hmm. So then you move to the next stage of lenders. We need all the lenders to be able to look at their rules and their protocols for conveyancing and so on and so on. And that has to be adapted as well. So to answer your question with any sense of confidence about how long this will take, I think 3 years, possibly longer. But I think certain bits, the entry level points, AML and everything else, that I think that can be done quite quickly.
Yep, you're talking about whole end solution completed from now all the way to exactly where it needs to be with everything.
It's the insurers that have to say we'll accept AML through multiple channels, through this process for our conveyancers, for this, for that, if it's from these providers, because they are the ones that have the right services that can be trusted, verified.
Exactly. That's it. That's for me. That would be similar to what you're saying with upfront information, right? And how important it is and getting it right. But for me, it's the same thing. Is these are our listed criteria of trusted people, and then you'd list your AMLs verified, and you go through a verification process. Whoever the body is that does that, and then if they come through with, say, for example, one that's on the list, perfect, done. Don't need to do it. It's just known that's fine.
Yeah, but the other thing as well is that we need to have a unified format of what information can be completed on what form. It sounds crazy, but not every solicitor uses the Law Society's forms, right? Or conveyancer. So some do, some don't. They all have a slightly different way of operating depending on which regulatory body or membership organisation they're part of. And I also think that people like the Law Society should actually have a different view on their current approach to this information and make this information publicly available, make TA6s, TA10s, TA7s, TA8s, make that available for all parties to use without a license fee being charged to certain bodies to use them. Which is quite crazy when you think that the certain bodies will charge the agent for a license for it, they'll charge the conveyancer for a license for it, they'll charge a supplier for a license for the same form that everybody needs to complete to move this thing forward fast. That is the parts that need to change. It's not filling out a form and getting it to a solicitor. That's relatively straightforward. And that's been done for years. But it's the acceptance of that and the understanding of, well, if I'm using a certain solicitor, they need that form done. If I use that one, they need that form done. You've got the BASPI being that's out there with lots of information. You've got the updated TA6, which is up there. Let's have that unified, available for everybody that's involved in the transaction at the very start. That will speed everything up.
Agreed. Bryan, I want to say a huge thank you for coming on the show and sharing your views, telling us about what you're up to, and I wish you all the best with the plans for planning it for the future. And I think that it's a huge step in the right way for the industry, in my honest and humble opinion, for what it's worth in terms of the upfront information and people having more information when they're making decisions. It's the right thing. It's the right way. It's needed to go for so many years, buddy. And I know that you've been saying that for so many years because I've known you for that long. And I think it's a right step. I just think it will be difficult for everybody to get it right in the grand scheme of things, because there's a lot of moving parts. But I do think once it's done, it will be a huge thing for the industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think by the fact we've had guidance now and there's a roadmap, hopefully more people will now jump on that and follow that and work in unison together to benefit ultimately sellers and buyers of properties.
Exactly. Bryan, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome, my friend.
I'll definitely have you back on soon.
Thanks, Lee.